Good day, everyone. I'm Tom White, the Chief Technology Officer at Navistone, the market leader in converting anonymous browsers to qualified direct mail buyers. Welcome to today's webinar, The Path from Anonymous to Known, How Digital Browsing Behavior is Reshaping Intent Marketing. As the cost of collecting, storing, and analyzing data has continued to decline, new opportunities have opened up to truly understand the online behavior of every visitor that comes to your website. At the same time, methodology to identify anonymous site visitors and match them with postal names and addresses is rapidly developing. The convergence of these two opportunities allows marketers to vastly improve the quality of content they send to consumers. I'm pleased to introduce Alan Abbott, Navistone's Chief Sales and Marketing Officer, who will be leading today's webinar. We encourage you to use the chat function on your screen to ask any questions you may have. Alan, who mystified the world by marrying a woman way more beautiful than he deserves, has spent 26 years as direct/digital marketer with Bloomingdale's, Exposures, Daytimers, and Paul Frederick, and with a 14% compounded annual sales growth rate at Paul Frederick over 7 years, he has probably sold more white shirts than any single person in history. He served on the board of the American Catalog Mailers Association for 9 years, 3 of which he served as chairman. And during his tenure at the ACMA, he testified before a joint congressional subcommittee on the future of the United States Postal Service, making Alan perhaps the only living person to both attend Woodstock and testify before Congress. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you the front man for the Navistone house band, the Navitones, Alan Abbott.
Hey, thank you, Tom. That was a great introduction. I appreciate it. So good afternoon and good morning to those of you in other time zones, and welcome to today's webinar. So we had our first technical glitch here. I can't get the slide to move. But we are, while we're waiting for that to work, there we go. So we are going to be recording today's event, and we will send you a link to the recording. So if you are taking notes and you miss something, don't worry about it. We will make that recording available so you can catch up. Please feel free to submit questions at any point in time during the webinar. We're going to hold the questions till the end, but we encourage you to submit them whenever you think of them. So let me give you a little background. I was a direct marketer for 26 years, and particularly in the catalog industry initially. And when I started back in 1986, the major driver of customer acquisition were outside mailing lists. There was a huge list broker and list management community, and you were able to rent lists and rent your own list and exchange, and that's generally how house file universes grew. Then in the 90s, the transactional data co-ops came along and fundamentally changed the way people acquired prospects for their customer acquisition mailings. And then, nothing much happened. So we're now in 2017, and from the launch of the co-ops to about a year ago, nothing new really happened in building audiences for direct mail. So when Larry Kavanaugh talked to me about the idea of what eventually became Navistone, I was excited about the product as a former mailer. But as I thought about it more, it became really apparent that this was going to open up a whole new opportunity to better understand our customers. So the goal today is to fully understand the value of intent data, and not just the IDs from someone's machine, so you can show them display ads, retargeting display ads, but the true value of aggregating all the intent data to drive marketing strategy across multiple channels. We're going to talk about individualization versus personalization, and something that we refer to as the new data contract. And we're also going to talk about how identifying previously anonymous website visitors and harnessing their intent, uh, in terms of what they're looking at and why they're looking at it, allows us to speak directly to them one at a time across multiple channels. So let's talk a little bit about consumer data. Data comes in many shapes and sizes, and it also comes from many sources. Much of it is historical in nature, primarily transaction data, and transaction data is what has driven direct mail and customer acquisition for quite a few years, very long time actually. Some of the data is predictive at the group level, so research data and demographics and psychographics. But probably the most critical data today is happening right now as I'm speaking to you, and that is the data that people are leaving behind, the digital body language, to help us understand what they might do next and even why they're going to do it. And if we pay careful attention to these digital clues, we can deliver individualized messaging that consumers will actually welcome. So let me give you a little example. Last month, being December, I started looking around for a fitness center for 2017 so I could make my annual resolution to eat better and work out more. And so, the way it usually goes is I find a place, I go 3 times, I lose interest, and then I start again the following December. But I looked at a lot of businesses that were local to where I live, and not surprisingly, especially the national chains, I soon after started getting display ads pop at me, and almost all of them were, save 10%, save 20%, get the first month free, all assuming that I was ready to make the purchase. I was ready to join at that moment. But one of the companies surprised me a little bit, and they popped a digital display ad that offered me a white paper or a report on how better diet and exercise actually can improve your life. And I was impressed by that because it indicated to me that someone out there is thinking about what type of messaging they send to their visitors on their website. So that brings us to the concept of the data contract. And the data contract it's not about legal requirements, and it's not something that the Internet Advertising Bureau or the Direct Marketing Association wants you to sign. It's about the obligation that marketers have to provide consumers with thoughtful, non-invasive messaging in return for the data that they provide. Consumers give us a tremendous amount of data, some of it willingly, some of it probably unknown to them. And how we use that data is going to determine whether we continue to have access to it. And if we fail to leverage that data and provide a better experience for the consumer, one of 3 things is going to happen. Probably the best thing that could happen is they ignore us. And I think anyone who sends out bulk email all the time is getting used to that people tend to ignore a lot of your communication. Worse than that is the adoption of ad blockers has been prevalent and is growing rapidly. And now it's estimated that 25 to 35% of all consumers are using some type of ad blocker device. And the worst thing that might happen is that the visitors might engage with a competitor who will make the investment to truly understand what they need and where they are on their path to purchase. And I'll give you a little example. Very well-known brand, ESPN. I am a soccer fan. I support, as do my 2 sons, the Liverpool Football Club. And the team often plays, weekday games that start at 8 o'clock in England, but start about 3 o'clock in the Eastern time zone where I live. And, every once in a while, I want to sneak a look and see what the score of the game is. And when I started doing that, I would go to ESPN's website, and typically I'm working in a home office. It's very quiet, and I'm thinking about something or working on something. So I would go to ESPN, and the first thing that would happen is one of these auto start videos would come on, really loud and really distracting, and completely throw me off my game. So I very quickly stopped going to the ESPN website to get that information. And that experience happens to consumers over and over and over again. And what the research tells us, though, is if we use the intent data that consumers leave in a positive way and give them a positive experience, they're happy to make that exchange, but they're not happy to get ambushed by ESPN with an auto display ad, certainly. So let's talk now about the concepts of personalization versus individualization, and they are not the same thing. So personalization, which for many, many years was the holy grail of direct marketing and has been going on for quite some time. We probably all remember Pearls, at the dawn of the internet age. And what personalization is about, though, is preparing in advance marketing messages to particular consumer segments and then dropping the personal information into pre-established data fields. So, for example, you may have a bulk email program, and if you are in the apparel business, as I was, you may send a different version of your email to people who bought clothing versus people who bought accessories. So that is, an example of personalization. You also may use personalization to select which of 4 catalog covers a customer might receive based on their previous purchasing history. But the messaging and the art is all developed in advance, and there are, a few data fields where we drop in information such as someone's name and perhaps a copy that we want to differentiate based on their purchasing history. Individualization, however, is very different. It's about identifying where a single consumer is on the path to purchase and creating a specific message for that individual based on where they are in that journey. So you might use the very same media. You might use email, but instead of bulk emails where you're mailing 2 versions, you're doing triggered emails where you're sending content based on the browsing behavior of a person on your website, maybe over the past few days. Or you could be creating an individualized catalog cover based on a combination of that visitor's past purchasing history and what they're looking at now. And I like to use the gardening industry as an example here. So my wife and I are fairly avid gardeners. We put in a good-sized vegetable garden every year. But we are not from the school that gets their gardening catalog on December 26th, starts to draw up the map, researches, prices, for months, and then places that order in March. So we know we live in Pennsylvania. We're going to plan around May 15th. We start thinking about this about May 1st. But there are others who, it's a 4-month-long process. So if you're in the gardening industry and someone's on your website, you probably have a lot of information about them. So you know what they're looking at right now. You also know what they've bought in the past, and you also know when they bought it. So if somebody is a seed buyer versus a plant buyer, they are likely to make their purchase earlier. And if they have a history of purchasing in February and they show up on your website sometime in February, that's a really good time to send them an individualized message to get them to place the order. You can also use information like what region they live in and whether or not they're close to planting time, because as you, I'm sure, know, planting times vary based on the geographic area you live in. Now, the significant breakthrough that allows individualized marketing to happen is our ability to identify previously unknown site traffic and match visitors to real people with specific contact information. And this is an industry that has really grown up only in the past couple years, but it opens up a tremendous opportunity for marketers to expand their ability to reach out to individuals with individualized messaging. So let's talk about the opportunities that exist today to identify our website traffic. So if this circle represents all of your website visitors, there's some slices that represent people that you know. And there are several categories of people you know. There are buyers. So somebody comes to your website and they make a purchase, and obviously that's the best kind of self-identification. They bought something, they told you where to ship it, and they told you their name and probably gave you their email address. So you have a lot of data on them, including what they bought with their first transaction. Unfortunately, that's only about 2 to 5% of site traffic for most people. Second, you have other people who self-identify, and that's another 2 to 5%. So they may be subscribing to an email, they may set up an account, and those people become knowable to you based on that action. Then there are what we call cross visitors. So there are, excuse me, there is a way that you can identify people based on their cookie ID that have previously been on your site. And even though they don't identify on that particular visit, if they have identified themselves on a previous visit, you can know who those are as well. And that's probably another 2 to 5% of your traffic. Bulk email seeding is a very effective way to identify other people that appear to be anonymous, but really are known to you. And using click-through links in your bulk email program, you can match user IDs for supposedly unknown visitors back to the existing people on your CRM file. And if you do this well, you can probably add another 5 to 10% of known traffic. But even if you do all these things, and even if you're at the top end of the number of people that you can identify each of these ways, you're still only identifying about 25% of your traffic. And if you're at the low end of the scale, you're only identifying about 10. And up until recently, everyone else was anonymous, which was extremely frustrating. So here we have, again, the unknown website visitors, or we're going to talk about now the unknown website visitors. And there are a bunch of people that appear anonymous to you, and they're primarily people who are visiting your site on more than one device. And if you have identified them on one of those devices, it is possible to match probably another 8 to 10% of your anonymous traffic to your existing CRM file. And the ability to do that may totally change your view of that individual and where they are on the path to purchase. We'll talk a little bit here also, excuse me, about IP address identification. If you're a business-to-business mailer, this is another way, another good way to find out who's exploring your site, at least at the company level. The issue for consumer businesses is that while corporate IP addresses are static, they don't change, consumer IP addresses are variable, they change often. And if you're an ISP and you've got 500,000 subscribers, you don't have 500,000 addresses. You've probably got maybe 100,000 addresses, and you rotate those as people sign in online and use your service. And again, that's a good tactic for B2B, not a huge help on the B2C side. And then finally, there are cookie-based networks which have really enabled matching of site visitors to actual personally identifiable postal information to explode. So what is a cookie-based network? A cookie-based network is a network that's built across many websites and enables one website to identify somebody and get PII on that person based on a visit to another website in that network. And there are, private networks. There are, public networks. I'm going to talk about a private network just to give you an example of how this works. So the Potpourri Group A very successful company, and I've known the leadership there for a long time. They're really, really smart guys. And I don't know that they're doing this, but since they're really smart guys, I'm guessing they probably are. So let's take an example where a visitor comes to their North Style website who has not been there before. So North Style will drop a first party cookie ID on the website browser of that visitor. And then let's say that visitor makes a purchase to make the story a little bit easier to follow. We now have a match between a particular cookie ID and an individual name and address. But while North Style is doing that, there's also a third cookie ID being dropped by the Potpourri Group corporate website, totally different domain. So it's not visible to North Style. It's not visible to any of their brands. But the Potpourri corporate domain now has that information as well. And let's say that that same visitor comes to the Cuddle Down website, a month later, and the first thing that will happen is, Cuddle Down will check the visitor's browser to see if there's a resident cookie from Cuddle Down on there. And if there's not, normally, what they would do is they would, put in a first party cookie ID and move on. But there's a step in between here where they can then check the Potpourri Group corporate domain and see if there's a cookie resident on there that was dropped anywhere by anyone in the network. So, based on that, Cuddle Down now is able to know who that person is based on their previous shopping behavior at North Style. And, cookie-based networks are extremely powerful, and they allow Navistone to match somewhere between 60 and 70% of our typical clients' anonymous traffic to postal names and addresses. So if you are 20% known visitors, meaning people you can identify, and you can get another 65% of the remaining 80%, you're talking about being able to identify almost 3/4 of your site traffic, which was unheard of not too long ago. But, knowing who they are is really only part of the story, and it's only part of the end goal of being an effective marketer. The who is critical, but the what, in terms of what are they looking at, how are they behaving, and perhaps understanding the why is equally important. And intent data can tell us this. So let's talk a little bit about different intent signals. And this is all information that you can glean from your website, and it can lead you to take different actions in terms of how you message and how you market to a particular individual. So first, there are people who place something in a cart and don't make the purchase in that visit, and they are clearly near the bottom of the purchase funnel. And the question is, what's it going to take to get them to the final step? And that is the time when you want to invest, probably heavily in advertising strategies to get that person to take that step. If you're a financial marketer or some types of service companies, a lot of the website activity has to do with filling out forms so they can learn what you're interested in, why you're interested in it. And if you start to fill out the form but don't finish, you're clearly interested, but something caused you to stop, and maybe you're just not ready at that point to buy or to join. And perhaps in that case, a more benefit-oriented information piece about your products and services might be more appropriate. So going back to that one fitness center that sent me a link to a white paper about why better diet, nutrition, and more exercise will make me feel better. So that was an example of that. People visit sometimes frequently, and if they come back, especially if they're coming back to a similar product or perhaps a similar product category, they're probably in the research stage, and perhaps they're sharing this with other people for validation. So my wife is the main shopper in our family, and but she'll often go to the site and go to a site and call me over and say, hey, what do you think of this? So she's looking for for validation from me in terms of is this good purchase? Because I was in the fashion business for 12 years, I have some credibility with her in terms of what might look good on her. And they're not as ready as the people who have carted something, but they're definitely near the bottom of the funnel. And again, someone you might want to invest more heavily in. You can learn a lot also from visit activity across multiple devices. So a lot of research starts on a mobile device. And although mobile conversion rates have risen, and in some cases risen dramatically over the past year or two, a lot of people, when they're really ready to make a purchase, they go back to their laptop or their desktop because it's still just much easier to do a transaction on a larger screen with a larger keyboard. And again, those folks who've made that step, they may be ready to get some advertising to close the deal. And there are a lot of other clues. If they use an on-site search bar, that certainly will give you some understanding of what they're looking for. And then page visits. Visiting many pages once sends a different message than visiting one page many times. And visiting different products in a category sends a different message than visiting one product in many categories. So you can read all of this stuff, and it'll help you understand where people are in that purchase journey and help you send appropriate advertising material to them. So let's talk about intent behavior and capturing it. And let's start with some definitions. So if your goal, and I hope your goal is this, is to build a single view of a consumer across multiple devices and multiple media channels, there are really three types of data that you're going to be collecting. One is called stated data, and that's data that's either self-reported by the consumer or more likely part of an internal process within your company. So it's a CRM system or a customer database. And an example of stated data might be that a customer bought a $180 dress on sale for $120. Right? So that is stated data. Derived data is actually data that's received and then interpreted as part of your analytics process. So if you go back to that same consumer, if this isn't the first time she bought clothing from you at a discount and it's the fourth time, you may come up with some derived data that says this person is a sale shopper, and I'm going to treat them differently because they're a sale shopper than I would if they were buying full price. And then everything else is inferred data. And inferred data comes from site traffic, and it comes from social media engagement, or anything else that really doesn't fit into those other two categories. So if somebody takes that same $180 dress that they bought for $120 and pins it on her Pinterest account, that's inferred data. And if she does that after she buys the dress, well, she's showing off a little bit for her friends, but she's endorsing your brand, so it's a good thing. If she pins it before she buys it, that's even better, because then you have an opportunity to reach out again and close that deal. So let's go back to the concept of fulfilling the data contract. And research shows over and over again that consumers will trade personal data in return for an enhanced experience with your brand. But there are some do's and don'ts here. The do's are, you definitely have to provide value to them. And value is, something that resonates with them, that helps them in the moment that they're visiting your site or shortly thereafter. Second, you want to speak directly to them. You want them to know that, you're thinking about them, and that your messaging that you're sending is the sort of the best that you can do based on what you know about that particular consumer. And then again, think about how you reach out to them. That, again, back to that ESPN uh, atrocity that I experienced. You don't want to do that. That's not a great idea. What you don't want to do is be intrusive. So you don't want to interrupt what people are doing with your advertising. You don't want to use a one size fits all approach because that just doesn't work particularly well anymore. Uh, and you don't want to be creepy, and we'll cover that a little bit in a minute. So let's talk about what do consumers find valuable, and I can assure you it's not a buy me now message every time they show up on your website. You really need to understand where the individual is on the path to purchase, and then provide them what they need at the appropriate time based on those intent signals that they give you. So, what do consumers find valuable? Well, rewards sometimes. Sometimes a little reminder could be helpful. Sometimes a recommendation is good, or recognition can also be helpful. Sometimes they need support, and if you can figure out what they need and what they value at that particular time during that purchase journey, you're definitely going to be a better fit for that consumer, and they're just going to like you better. And then you want to take that knowledge and deliver smarter, individualized marketing. So some of you may remember when caller ID started to become popular, and again, I've been in this business since 1986. So I remember certain companies who thought it would be really cool when Mrs. Jones called to answer the phone and say, "Hey, Mrs. Jones, how are you? It's nice of you to come back." That was not cool. That was extremely creepy and got a lot of people in trouble. And, as an industry, we figured out pretty quickly that that was a bad idea. But, interestingly enough, we still do that. We still do that type of thing. I'm on a website and I'm looking at a blue striped shirt and I don't buy it. And then, for the next 2 days, I'm inundated with digital display ads showing that very same blue striped shirt. And that is a little bit creepy. So, what can you do? Well, you can offer complementary products. You can offer an assortment of products that are in the general area of interest for that individual. Again, you want to read the intent signals and invest more heavily when those signals show that the person is ready to buy. And probably best of all, if you can anticipate consumer needs, you're really going to be ahead of the game. So let's just say someone bought a tent and they bought a small tent, which would indicate to you that they're a backpacker. So, pretty sure they're going to be going on a backpacking trip soon. And if you can anticipate their needs and what they might need, especially if they didn't think of it, what a great experience for them. And I don't, it could be bug spray, it could be flashlight batteries, it could be a sleeping bag, because maybe they need a new sleeping bag as well. But if you can anticipate consumer needs by, based on their behavior, both their purchase behavior and what they're looking at on your website, you're going to deliver a really good customer experience. Okay, so here comes the commercial. I'm going to prepare everyone. So Navistone has been involved for about 15 months now in working, helping clients work the bottom of that funnel, and we're using digital to print retargeting, which is a fast growing opportunity to help our clients reach out to their customers when they're about ready to buy. And, direct mail has been a sort of much maligned discipline. The cool kids don't want to do that. They all want to do digital. But believe it or not, more money was spent in the US last year on direct mail advertising than on Google Ads. So someone's using it, and people are starting to use it more effectively. And you can see here that one of the postcards that we created for a client, where we're able to identify the client and based on their website behavior, drop in particular product images and copy based on what the client wants to do. So end of commercial. But there's a huge opportunity here, and a lot of companies that considered themselves, purely digital and wouldn't touch print a couple years ago, are now looking at this and saying, direct mail still has the highest response rate of, of any marketing media. Why not? So we're going to entertain some questions now that we have gotten. So first question is, and if you have any additional questions, you can still include them or still post them now, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. So Jen asked us, how accurate is the match? So how do I know you're really finding the people who browse? And what we found is that the match results are actually better than they are with transaction-based lists. One of the things that we do is we mail our own retargeting postcards first class, and so we get the undeliverables back, and the undeliverable rate is very, very low. So the matching is done in a very accurate fashion. But thank you for that question. Someone else asked, how quickly do you have to mail someone for this to actually work? And a lot of digital marketing lore, will tell you that, recency is everything. So, I had a big argument with a very well-known consultant about how valuable digital data is. And, he was saying that it was valuable for about 20 minutes. And, we're taking an opposite argument. So, hotline typically will get the best response. But running names that are based on digital browsing behavior into campaign mail, also works quite well. And we've even seen year-old browsing data, especially in digital businesses, work quite well for people. Back to that gardening example, we're using year-old data in some cases to help understand particular consumers and what they're doing. Last question we have here is, are a lot of companies doing this? And it's a pretty new idea, but it is gaining momentum. There are probably 6 or 7 people in the general space of digital to print, and we're all doing slightly different things, or in some cases very different things. But it's getting traction, and it's also getting the interest of the investment community, which is generally a sign that something is going to be here to stay. So we are out of questions, and my clicker again is not moving. Andrew, can we get the clicker? There we go. So I just want to summarize again, and the whole idea here is can we identify and reach your best consumers, your best prospects, your best customers with individualized, personally addressable media, and if you really want to fulfill your end of the data contract and engage your consumers properly, you're going to have to do that. So you want to identify your visitors, understand what motivates them, and then deliver smart, individualized marketing. So hopefully you'll take away something valuable today and use it in your marketing program. And if you want to contact me directly and get some more information, you can reach me at the email address here or at that phone number. And I want to, again, we'll send you a link to the recorded session. And I want to thank you very much for attending, and I hope this was valuable for you, and we hope to see you again soon.